today, Dallas Mavericks fans, MFFLs? Unfortunately, I was not able to review the game in the last couple days, the weekend, Mother's Day. Hope you guys enjoyed your weekend as well with family, whoever else. I appreciate you guys for all the support. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share before we get going. But the last game, the Dallas Mavericks were able to take care of business in Game 3, taking a 2-1 series lead. The Dallas Mavericks won Game 3 with a final score of Dallas 105, the Oklahoma City Thunder 101. The Dallas Mavericks, I'm going to say this was a defensive effort game. And you saw one of those games where now, of course, I guess if you're watching the NBA playoffs in general, you're starting to see a lot of officiating sometimes being called into question. And some of these guys are being able to get away with a little bit more, which I'm going to say at the end of the day, I have no issue with, because the NBA playoffs, to me, it should be about physicality. It should be about being a little bit more, again, I guess you want to say slow to make these whistles and these game-changing calls that officials sometimes you can see happen during the regular season. This was a game, you saw Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he did put about 31 points, I believe. You had a little bit contribution from a Jalen Williams, a guy like Chet Holmgren, especially on the defensive end. I'm going to say Chet Holmgren has shown himself to be a very, very sufficient rim protector in this series against the Dallas Mavericks, but especially I'm going to say to start these first two rounds in the playoffs in general, but especially in this round against the Dallas Mavericks. But the Dallas Mavericks were able to come out on top with guys like Luka Doncic, 22 points, 15 assists, obviously 5 rebounds, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists. You're looking at what Luka Doncic is able to bring. Obviously, dealing with these leg injuries, these knee injuries, they're not going to lighten up at all. And we don't have to sit here and say, I'm going to expect Luka Doncic to be dealing with this lingering thing going on for the remainder of the postseason. So he's going to have to find his way to, I guess you want to say, just pick his certain spots. Because you do know you have a guy like Kyrie Irving, who also had 22 points himself. We're talking about 22, 7, and 5. You're looking at Kyrie Irving. He's going to be able to pick up momentum when he can. I don't worry about Kyrie Irving in the grand scheme of an entirety of a game, because you do know Kyrie Irving has this special innate ability that a lot of guys don't have, to be able to kind of turn it on and pick up his spots when he needs to. And obviously with Luka Doncic being hampered a little bit more, we're talking about still, I believe Luka Doncic had about 40 minutes in this game, Kyrie Irving with 41. You're going to look around and say, who else can take some of the pressure off of these two guys, because you know they're going to get lots of attention and focus from OKC's defense. But PJ Washington, 27 points. 2 games, back-to-back games. We're talking about in game 2 and game 3. PJ Washington with 29 points, and then in game 3, 27 points. You saw from the beginning of the game, PJ Washington with a nice dunk on Chet Holmgren to start off the game. This was, again, a momentum play. And one thing I'm going to say, when you're watching PJ Washington, his game is starting to grow overall, because it's not just knocking down three-point shots, which he's starting to knock out down these jumpers a little bit more, and just being that threat. And I guess you want to say giving OKC a little bit more to have to worry about, but it's just the aggression he's playing with on the offensive end in general. You're seeing him get the ball in his hands, not being afraid to take a guy off the dribble and let up these floaters. And I'm going to say he's getting very comfortable with taking these floaters. And I'm going to say, also, when you're watching what PJ Washington brings, even though he is giving a bit of an uptick in postseason scoring in these last couple games at least, you're looking at what you're seeing on the defensive side of the ball. He's not starting to waver on that side of the ball. That's the number one thing I've seen. Of course, you're going to say sometimes when guys are taking a little bit more responsibility and control on the offensive end, sometimes it may hamper them a little bit on the defensive end and just the energy they're able to give on that side. But that is not true for PJ Washington. I'm going to say also, when you're looking at what Derrick Jones Jr., he is not a guy where you're looking at the stat sheet, where you should be looking at the stat sheet. I'm going to give a guy like Josh Green the same head nod. When you're watching Josh Green, these are 2 players that are going to pay major dividends in this series. But obviously, we're talking about Derrick Jones Jr. being a starter and playing these big minutes. We're going to continue to need him to just show that defensive effort, the hustle plays, getting out of transition, extra offensive rebounds. This is just an all-around team that we're starting to see. If the Dallas Mavericks can just find their footing to remain consistent for the entirety of this postseason series, this playoff series, I'm going to say second round at least. You don't want to jump out ahead because you have to take care of business right now. But if you're looking at the Dallas Mavericks and saying that they're going to be able to continue to just be consistent offensively, defensively, and I'm going to say more so consistently offensively in the aspect of just being able to find the right timing for making, I guess you want to say, smart decisions. Because we have seen, these are some close games. I believe that first game for the Oklahoma City Thunder, a blowout win, obviously. But then you're looking at the last 2, a little bit tighter, and the Dallas Mavericks finding their footing and momentum at certain important stretches of the game, and that has been the difference in the last 2, with the Mavericks being able to take a 2-1 lead on the Thunder. You're going to say, we have got to just remain consistent. Don't have any major mistakes, because again, when you do get to close games, you do not want to allow a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to be able to find his space. Because one thing we have seen, a lot of people, he gets called a free throw merchant, a guy, and I'm gonna say obviously he embellishes some contact. He embellishes just, again, the contact that he's taking, and we can't complain too much. We have a Luka Doncic at certain points does that, but I don't think it's to the level that a Shai Gilgeous does. And as long as the officials are gonna continue to give it to him, he has no reason to stop doing it. But I'm gonna say as well, he's not just a guy. I'm gonna say he's only a free throw guy as well, because when you're watching Shai Gilgeous, the number one thing I'll give him a little bit of credit. And I guess you want to say maybe compare him to a guy like Kawhi Leonard. The number one thing I've given a healthy Kawhi Leonard, I'll say. A healthy Kawhi Leonard, he is just very good at getting to his spots in the mid-range, especially. We're talking about that free throw line in. When you allow a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to get there where he's trying to get there to where he's trying to be, you're talking about a guy that's still 6'6". He has some nice length, and he's able to get his shot off. That mid-range jumper, the fadeaway especially, is very pretty. You have to give him credit for the skill set that he does have in this league. And he is very intentional when it comes to getting to the rim. And again, like I said, as long as the officials are going to continue to give him these ticky-tack offensive foul or defensive foul calls on the opponent, the defender trying to guard him, why would he stop doing it? I mean, we're going to have to continue to just be consistent and be smart. That's the number one thing. Be smart. I think this is going to be a game 4 where you're going to be asking to see the defensive pressure on a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I guess you want to say hopefully we can try to put a little bit more pressure on him excuse me, early on in the game, because when you are watching what he can bring, that will open up some things for a guy like a Lou Dort at certain points who has not played well. And I can get into Lou Dort, obviously. The number one issue I have with a guy like Lou Dort, I don't want to call him a dirty player just outright, but he makes dirty plays sometimes. You watch the way that he guards Luka Doncic. Now, I'm going to say, let's be clear. It's the postseason. You see, if you know a guy's banged up, of course you're not trying to naturally injure him, or you shouldn't be trying to naturally injure him. But of course you might maybe tap him a little bit more, excuse me, in certain points, just to put a little bit more pressure on him, make him force his hand a little bit more. But what Lou Dort is starting to do, apparently, it seems to me, when you're watching the games, he is putting a little too much emphasis on being physical with a Luka Doncic at certain points. Now, again, I'm not going to complain about the physicality of the postseason in general, but there's a certain way to do it. So I'm going to hope that we can just continue to see at least clean play and the officials be able to keep this thing under control, because one thing you have seen with Luka Doncic, if you're able to keep him in the game, injured or not, dealing with some of these lingering injuries, excuse me, that he's going to be dealing with the rest of the postseason. Let's go ahead and accept that fact right now. As long as you're able to keep Luka Doncic just in the game, he's going to be able to find his space and his spots. The third quarter, fourth quarter, that's when he needs him the most. Just be able to be that playmaker, because what we have seen, although he is banged up, the Oklahoma City Thunder are still forcing his hand. They're still throwing double teams at him. They're trying to give him different looks, and that's going to open up things for other guys that are going to be on the court. So we want to see the Dallas Mavericks. This is going to say the next biggest thing we're going to say going into game 4 should just be about controlling the pace and staying engaged, because one thing you can't let the Oklahoma City Thunder do, because they are a young team and they have some young talent, you cannot let them get out on these momentum runs, because that's when you find yourself in trouble and having to play a little bit of catch up. Also, two guys that I've continued to talk about, and we're talking about just the dynamics they bring, the difference in their physicality, the difference in their skill sets. We're talking about a Daniel Gafford who played about 20 minutes, I believe 8 points, 5 rebounds, had a block in there, and talking about Derek Lively, 20-year-old rookie Derek Lively, in about 27 minutes, 12 points, 8 rebounds. And this is what I'm going to say. The number one thing, I'm going to give Derek Lively a lot of credit for his late game free throw shooting. Obviously, we're talking about a guy, I feel he has got to get better with his hands and his intention when it just comes to getting the ball up and being able to put the ball in the rim. We're talking about the tough baskets. I mean, the tough, just a simple, nice shot around the rim. Derek Lively, I know he wants to work on that in the offseason, because, again, his mentor, Tyson Chandler, he's been giving him lots of advice. He says that's kind of like his big brother at this point. But I'm going to say a guy like Derek Lively, where he can improve, is just his touch around the rim. That's going to help the Dallas Mavericks out in the long run, because he did go 2 of 7. He ended up with 12 points, but we're talking about 8 of 12 on free throws. And the biggest thing I'm going to give him a lot of credit for, I'm talking about Derek Lively in this last game, in game 3 against the Thunder. This is going to be one of those situations where you're going to say, maybe this is where you saw a Derek Lively just grow up and mature completely. Because one thing you saw earlier on, of course, he, like I said, he's having some issues putting the ball in the rim around the basket. But what he did not do was give up and just playing physical and still being a presence on the other side of the ball as well. But number one thing, obviously, the Oklahoma City Thunder started to employ a little bit of a hack of Lively, the hack of Shaq the old way. You try to foul a guy that you feel is gonna have some issues at the free throw line, and it's gonna open you up some opportunities on the offensive side for yourself. But Derek Lively, we're talking about late game. One thing, the funniest things I think you saw in the game is a play where Chet Holmgren's trying to get the foul on Derek Lively. Derek Lively realizes that he's running away from him, and Chet Holmgren, as long as he is, he's chasing around the court, and then finally they do end up with the foul, and Derek Lively has to knock down these free throws. The number one thing, I believe Jason Kidd called the timeout, and Derek Lively, they say Kyrie Irving talks to him and tells him, stop running. Just knock down these free throws and continue to move on. And he ends up knocking down the next 4 free throws, which end up paying major dividends for the Dallas Mavericks in the final score 105-101 over the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Derek Lively is a guy I'm going to say, this is now where we're going to be looking up in a couple years, I feel like, and say maybe the Thunder series in the second round, his rookie year, that's where he starts to figure out, you know what, I can be a very impactful player in this league, and not just a guy that can make plays here and there, kind of spot start. This is going to be a guy that we're going to say he's going to be one of those milestone players for the Dallas Mavericks. We're talking about being here hopefully for a long, long time. And of course, as he does, I guess you want to say he continues to grow and develop his body frame, all that stuff, and just his skill set in general. We're going to hopefully say this is a guy that the Dallas Mavericks drafted years ago that we can be very, very, very proud of. I want to say the Dallas Mavericks themselves also, when you're looking on the other side, a guy like Josh Giddey, who only played about 13 minutes, and you saw the Dallas Mavericks employing that aspect. I kind of said we did in a game or so during the regular season. You're going to see Josh Giddey being open to take these wide open 3-point shots because the Dallas Mavericks don't feel he can consistently knock them down. So what is that going to do? End up playing 13 minutes and he started the game. That's going to open up opportunities for guys like Wiggins and Joe and Casey Wallace off the bench for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So the Dallas Mavericks are going to have to stay engaged with the rest of these role players, stay engaged with everyone outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because the one thing I will say, I think the Mavericks have a lot of ability to do for the remainder of this series. Hopefully we knock this thing out as soon as we can, is watching out and saying, as long as we're able to make Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a one-dimensional player. So if he's going to be just not a playmaker, you can't let him be a playmaker and a scorer. If we're going to just say Shai Gilgeous, you can get as many points as you need to get, but we're not going to let everybody else be able to knock down open shots, or we're not going to give everybody else these wide open looks, because we're going to allow a guy like maybe PJ Washington or Derrick Jones Jr. And I'm going to say, obviously, you're talking about a Dante Exum, a Josh Green. You can throw many different looks at a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because you do have to keep very talented players, obviously, on their toes as much as you can. But if we're, again, the number one thing I'm going to say for the Dallas Mavericks is you have got to make Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a one-dimensional player, because when the rest of the guys around him start to get rolling, that's when the Mavericks will find themselves some trouble. So this is going to be a game for, I'm going to say, potentially watch out for Chet Holmgren. Watch out for these guys, the Casey Wallaces of the game. Watch out for a Lou Dort potentially, maybe being more consistent from knocking down shots. A guy like Jalen Williams, who's shown himself to be a very proficient player for the Thunder in this season. So this is going to be very interesting for the Dallas Mavericks in Game 4, but they did take care of business in Game 3, taking a 2-1 lead. If the Dallas Mavericks are able to pull out this second game at home, and now you're finding yourself with a 3-1 lead going back to Oklahoma City, this is going to be something the Mavericks are going to be able to put in their hat and say, let's go finish this thing out on the road. Let's get prepared for the next round, and let's see what exactly and how far we can actually take this thing with Jason Kidd now being your locked-in head coach for at least the foreseeable future. I appreciate you guys for all the support. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share. The Dallas Mavericks, again, are going to face against a very hungry number 1 seed in the Oklahoma City Thunder. So if you think this series is over by any stretch of the imagination, get that out of your mind right now, because you are going to have to come in here fiery. You're going to have to come in here ready. And Luka Doncic himself, the number one thing I saw in the post game, he says everything hurts, obviously. And if you're talking about Luka Doncic, I give him the credit the same way I would give a guy like Dirk Nowitzki. Excuse me. When you watch Dirk Nowitzki, if you knew as long as his body parts were completely attached, he's going to be out there giving whatever he can. And obviously, this is the postseason. Luka Doncic himself said it for the last couple games. If this was a regular season, he probably would have been sitting already, trying to rest himself up as much as he can. But this is the postseason. One game can completely alter and change the momentum of an entire series. So we're going to continue to need him out there just fighting and giving us everything that he actually can. Kyrie Irving, again, we're just going to be a guy. We're talking about that veteran leadership he's bringing to this team. A guy that's out there kind of just controlling things when Luka Doncic is not having the ball in his hands. And I will give Jason Kidd a little bit more credit for letting Kyrie Irving run the show a little bit more in these last few games. Again, knowing that Luka is dealing with what he's dealing with, and Kyrie Irving just being that consummate professional, giving effort defensive side of the ball, and calling out guys when they need to be called out. Not in a way where you're trying to embarrass them, but just saying, hey, I know you can give me a little bit more. That's exactly what this team needs going forward. I appreciate you guys once again for all the support. The Dallas Mavericks will be facing off against the Oklahoma City Thunder tonight, 8:30 p.m. Central Time. This is going to be now, a very important game for the Mavericks. You can, I don't want to, me personally, I don't want to come into this game thinking as I guess you want to say as lowly as you can, saying, okay, you know what, it's not the end of the world if you go out and this thing ends up 2-2. No, if you're the Dallas Mavericks, you want to show that you're a serious team, and these are the games that you have to come out there with that passion, that fire, and give the home crowd something to be very proud of. I appreciate you guys again for all the support. The Dallas Mavericks will now be trying to take a 3-1 lead. We're going to very much so hope that they do this as a Mavericks fan base in general. As always, go Mavs, and enjoy the rest of your day.